And speaking of shit libs, oh my God. Bill Maher gave a rant last Friday, not this today, but a week ago. And he was trending over it. Why was he trending over it? Because it may have been the dumbest thing I've ever heard on television, and that includes the religious channels. Yeah, and CNN. So he was giving a speech about how you shouldn't complain about living in the United States. Says a guy who's been a millionaire since 1988. You shouldn't complain. A guy who's never had to have his medicine, never lived under a bridge, never went homeless, never had never had to worry about anything. So listen to what he did. This is amazing. And here we go.
But liberals, as usual,
let's turn it up a little.
But liberals, as usual in this era, have now gone too far in the other direction. They under-romanticize America. They have no perspective. Last week, the Taliban murdered a comedian. His name was Nazar Muhammad, and he made up funny songs on TikTok. They forced him into a car, tortured, and then executed him. A comedian.
They murdered a comedian, whereas Bill Maher just murdered comedy, which is a little different. I don't know why that would hit so close to home for him. He's such a rebel. Well, here we go.
Hair off his face.
A thing like that hits a little close to home for me. I've had 2 presidents up my ass. This one warned me to stop speaking my mind.
They need to watch what they say, watch what they do. And this is not a time for remarks like that. There never is.
Oh.
And this one sued me over a joke.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, neither experience was pleasant. But I didn't have to worry about being dragged till I'm dead behind a Toyota Tacoma. Have a little perspective about the stuff we howl about here.
Again, Bill is ignoring that Edward Snowden has to live in Russia right now. Julian Assange, they've been trying to kill him for a decade straight. That's what we do to journalists here in the United States. That's what we do. So they did that to a comedian. Guess what we do to journalists? Okay, all right. And we censor everybody. Okay, here we go. Wow. So Bill's going to tell you how great America is. Here we go.
I'm sorry your professor said something you didn't like. That won't be a problem with the Taliban because you're not allowed to go to school. And so,
guess who invented the Taliban, Bill? Afghanistan had a socialist government. The United States intervened, propped up the Taliban, invented them as a way to fight back against Russia. We thought we were going to have a big own on Russia. And now the Taliban, who, by the way, we're working with right now. So these people you hate who are taking Afghanistan and keeping it in the Stone Age, we invented them. The United States. Bill doesn't know this, so he doesn't share it with you. So that's why he has his fake millionaire liberal outrage right now at people criticizing America. Why? Because he's an ignorant douchebag who has never fucking experienced any of the shit that America throws at most of its people because he's lived a life of privilege his entire fucking life. Here we go.
Arabia, grown women can be jailed for doing the kind of things we think of as routine without the permission of a male guardian.
Saudi Arabia, who we prop up with the petrodollar. Saudi Arabia, who funded ISIS directly, who we prop up with the petrodollar, who we are now murdering people around the globe at the behest of. Why do you think we're murdering the poorest people in the world in Yemen? Why do you think we're helping commit a genocide? Because we're in bed with Saudi Arabia, Bill. They're our friends.
China rounds you up if you're the wrong religion and puts you in camps.
Oh, God.
More children in Burkina Faso work than are in school. Only 5% of Burundians have electricity. The homicide rate in Honduras is 8 times what it is here.
I wonder why all these problems. What is going on that would have such a high murder rate in Honduras? Why would that be happening, Bill? What is America doing?
The inflation rate in Venezuela is 2,719%.
Boy, it does suck to live in Venezuela. I wonder why their inflation rate is 279%. I wonder if there's some capitalist behemoth that has been trying to fuck over that socialist country because they actually take care of their people and lift them out of poverty. And as we all know, the mission of the United States military is to make sure no socialist government ever is successful in South America or Central America. And I know that, but I guess the guy from HBO doesn't know that and doesn't know why they're having such problems in Venezuela. Okay, it's because the capitalists, which run our government, have been fucking over that country economically ever since they became socialists. That's why. Again, Bill doesn't know his asshole from a hole in the ground and thinks we should look at other countries which we destroyed and think that we should feel better back here at home, as they do the same thing to us back here at home.
The Philippines, in the last 5 years, has put to death 27,000 low-level drug dealers. My old job. In North Korea.
Guess what, Bill? The United States, because of the drug war, happens to be the world's largest penal colony, not the Philippines. The United States imprisons more people than fucking China. And those people are black and brown. Disproportionately. We have a racist criminal justice system which locks up more people than any other country in the fucking world, including China, which has about 10 billion more people than we do. This is your success story. You're really pointing to the United States as a success story. That's what Bill Maher's doing right now and telling you to shut up if you want to complain about it and make it better.
Yeah, people starve to death. The only people who starve here are doing it for a role.
So that's, again, Bill Maher. Imagine if you were one of the 35 million people in America who are food insecure, and you saw that piece of shit make that joke, telling you you're not hungry, you're not food insecure. Well, Bill, if you did a cursory Google search, you would find out that 35 million people, according to the USDA's latest household food insecurity in the United States report, more than 35 million people in the United States experienced hunger in 2019. Households with children are more likely to experience food insecurity. 35 million people, most of those households with children, are experiencing food insecurity. That was before the pandemic. That was before COVID. You know that 80% of workers were paycheck to paycheck. Do you know that, Bill? You know that 50% of wage earners earn less than $30,000 in the United States? Did you know that? Do you know that 50% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency in the United States, Bill? Of course he doesn't know anything, because the only time he talks to anybody outside of his class is when someone drives him somewhere. U.S. comes in last in healthcare rankings, Bill. Did you know that? The United States comes in last in healthcare rankings of major countries. In fact, here's where we are. Dominican Republic is 35th in healthcare. Costa Rica, 36th. United States, 37th, behind the Dominican Republic and Costa fucking Rica, the richest country in the world. And that's not because we don't have the resources to do it, Bill. That's because the country's run by pieces of shit liberals who are fucking corporate cocksuckers like you are. That's why this is. Not because we don't have the resources to have a good healthcare system, because of pieces of shit like you. When activists activate to do shit like that, you shit on them and tell them to shut their mouths. And vote for Amy Klobuchar. That's Bill. That was Bill. I should call him Bill O'Reilly. Right. That was Bill Maher's choice last year. Amy Klobuchar. You want to hear some more stupid shit?
If you think America is irredeemable, turn on the news or get a passport and a ticket on one of those sketchy airlines that puts its web address on the plane.
You mean like Frontier? Oh, I'm sorry.
There's a reason Afghan mothers are handing their babies to us.
Yeah. He doesn't know the reason, but he thinks it's a big own on people who are critics of the United States. The reason why Afghan mothers are handing their babies to American soldiers is because the United States wiped out their socialist government in the 70s so we can fucking prop up the Mujahideen, which is now the Taliban, which is going to kill those fucking people. Why? Because we propped them up and invented them and got rid of a government that was actually taking care of them. Oh, and then for 20 years, we're here with Glenn Greenwald, Big Shot. Now, ever since the hysteria over Russiagate, there's been a culture developing that calls for internet censorship. And we saw figures on the left calling for censorship, pleading for the unaccountable authority of faceless Silicon Valley employees to protect us from our own thoughts and the thoughts of others. And now the left is being suppressed on Facebook and other platforms. What is it going to take, Glenn, for the left to understand that we can't let Silicon Valley pick and choose who gets free speech or not?
I don't know. I mean, I wish I knew the answer to that. I was just actually watching, I really recommend it, an interview that Joe Rogan did, I think a week ago or so, with Ira Glasser, who used to be the head of the ACLU when the ACLU was really the ACLU from 1978 until 2001. Yes. He retired shortly before the 9/11 attacks. And the first crisis he had to deal with was when the ACLU was representing actual neo-Nazis, not the people who get called neo-Nazis now, like Republicans or Jimmy Dore, but like people with actual swastikas like on their arms. The ACLU represented the right that they had to march through the streets of Skokie, Illinois in 1977, a town filled with Holocaust survivors. And he explains that he thinks it's utterly insane that the left has become the primary advocates of corporate and state censorship. And he was talking about, and there's a film actually that's fantastic, a documentary of his life that was just released in the last year. Mighty Ira, I actually interviewed him too. And he was saying how when he was representing Nazis and defending the right of white supremacists and the KKK to speak, his primary allies in that fight were civil rights leaders, African-American preachers who knew that if the state got the right to censor, and they did it in the first instance against some crazy right-wing fanatic, they would turn around and use it against Malcolm X. That would be the next target. So obvious. And what amazes me about the left is if you say to the left, what do you think of Facebook and Google and Amazon? They'll say, oh, those are fascist, autocratic, repressive, oligarchical companies, which they are. And then you say, what do you think of the government, the federal government? Oh, they're neoliberals. You can't trust the FBI. What about the federal court system? Oh, they're all right-wing assholes appointed by George Bush and Dick Cheney and Donald Trump. All true. And then you say to them, do you want to give the power to those corporations and or the state and or the courts to determine who can and can't be heard on the internet? I'll be like, yes, absolutely. They can't fucking put these propositions together that they're empowering the very institutions that they regard in every other instance as odious and pernicious. And I think what's really going on, Jimmy, this whole thing with like GameStop, I think is really revealing something interesting, because to me, it's one of the most serious threats to Wall Street hegemony in years. It's not going to take down Wall Street. I don't want to overstate it, but it has really fucked with their model. It has caused serious panic. They don't know what to do. They've taken all kinds of steps and said all sorts of things that they don't like to do or say because it pulls the mask down. It shows how much they cheat. They're panicked over what's going on. And it is so interesting to me that you have this huge institutional left, really well-funded, major media outlets like the Young Turks and this whole Justice Democrats industry founded by foundations, these activist groups. And now you have all these elected officials in Congress and state houses, all part of the left. And this huge blow against Wall Street had nothing to do with them. They weren't a participant in it in any way. It came from these like 4chan trolls who, to the extent they have politics at all, sure as hell has nothing to do with liberal cultural pieties or even left-wing political orthodoxies. They're just like angry at the system and they want to fuck with it and burn it down. And you have the left who doesn't know how to confront real power centers. They don't want to confront the CIA
Yep.
or
Yep.
the Pentagon or Wall Street or Silicon Valley. So they content themselves with like symbolic gestures about pulling down statues from the Capitol or going on crusades about gender pronouns or censorship that actually is being carried out by corporations and will eventually be turned against them because it's or pretending like the Boogaloo Boys or the Proud Boys are the real fascist threat in the United States and not some clownish joke sideshow that real power centers hate just as they do. This huge institutional left has almost no ability to put fear in the heart of ruling class elites. And I think it's so interesting that this real threat to Wall Street is coming from a group of people who most certainly don't identify with that left at all.
Yes, we're going to get into that more. It's amazing what's happening. It's as George Carlin said, the system is rigged, the game is up, and everybody sees it now. But I wanted to so we have so much to talk about, but I wanted to get your thoughts on something because in recent weeks, the online left has been fixating on me, and half the attention is animated by I would say 90% of it is animated by bad faith actors, but there's something else going on. The obsession with me, I think, Glenn, shows the directionless the left is in right now. There's no larger political project for people to organize around. And there's no leadership coming from figures like Bernie Sanders or AOC or the Squad. None. There's nothing that they have us focused on to work towards right now. Nothing except censoring our political opponents. And there's still lingering resentment against me for my force the vote strategy, not because of the merits of it, but because it exposed progressives in power that they won't challenge the Democratic Party leadership. And the people who we elected and thought would be an insurgent force just turned into loyal Democrats. It turns out the Justice Democrats are just Democrats. So do you believe that the left will simply turn into the Democratic Party apologists during the entire Biden era?
Yes, I do. So first of all, this obsession with you, I don't mean with your strategy, but with you personally. There's like an entire, I think that like they're going to create a Pulitzer Prize soon called Pulitzer Prize for Excellence in Commentary on James Dore. It's like an entire fucking industry. Like a third of the left media talks about you personally, constantly, all the time. It reminds me a lot, in 2010, 2011, 2012, when WikiLeaks pioneered this really groundbreaking model of how secrets of the most powerful entities on the planet can be leaked and published. It found a major vulnerability in actual power. It was incredibly innovating and inspiring and exciting and important. And within a short period of time, all anyone wanted to talk about was that Julian Assange was an asshole, that he had like an abrasive personality, that, as though like the issue was, do you want to date him? And it just became like, no, that guy's a jerk. Who gives a fuck? Yeah, he is a jerk. Julian's a jerk in like a lot of ways, and like a lot of ways that I can be. You're definitely an asshole. Like these things are not in dispute, but they're also totally irrelevant, right? They're completely irrelevant. The reason that you're effective is the same reason that they consider you an asshole, because you raise your voice, you care about things, you want to be heard. You think that somebody could have done what Julian did, which is fuck so hard with the CIA and the military industrial complex and the most powerful corporations on earth if he was just like a nice guy who kind of was just like a retiring personality? No, they're inextricably linked. But this is what I was saying just a minute ago in that last answer was, if you're on the left and you have two choices. One is to try and think about how to fuck with Wall Street like that Reddit group just did, or to blow holes open in the walls of the NSA or the CIA like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange did, or try and take down the monopoly power of Silicon Valley like a lot of hardworking people are doing who care about those issues, including your good friend Matt Stoller. That's one way you can go. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of risk. It's very difficult to figure out how to do that. Or you can just like devote yourself to like internet gossip and bullshit chatter and like trivial personality disputes. That is super easy. And it's also profitable. People love to like hate, You stimulate hatred. Fuck Jimmy Dore. Fuck Jimmy Dore. Look at what he said. He put this guy on his show. What does that have to do with politics? You claim that you're interested in the working class. You claim you're interested in people's lack of healthcare coverage, in people's inability to get jobs, to live. They have to live at home. Their communities are ravaged by joblessness and and you're talking about Jimmy fucking Dore and whether or not he's a good guy or whether or not you like him, instead of the strategy that he pioneered that caused a huge debate about how to bring. If you're doing that, you are an absolute and complete and total coward and a fraud. You're doing that because you need to fill your YouTube shows and your columns and your Twitter feed with content that keeps people interested, but like you're stimulating the most primitive, primal emotions of people that are totally easy to stimulate, but that are completely meaningless to stimulate. You know that you have no ability to do real activism, to put real fear into the hearts of actual ruling class elites. And I find it so revealing. It doesn't mean that every one of their critiques of you is false. I just don't give a shit. I don't give a shit what about your personality. I don't want to debate that with you. I'm more interested in what you can contribute to these political aims, these political goals, the things that we're all claiming we're about, but they're not about that, Jimmy. They don't have any ability to do it. Now, the other thing about it is that I just want to quickly comment on. You tell me, what is the difference between that left and the Nancy Pelosi-led, Chuck Schumer-led Democratic Party? I want to know what the difference is. I don't see any fucking differences. And they know that there's no differences. They spent the last year of their lives marching behind Bernie Sanders, who was in turn marching behind Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And you know what's going to happen in about 2 to 3 weeks? Bernie Sanders is going to shepherd the nomination through his committee, the budget committee, of a woman who has spent the last 5 years calling him and his followers continuously in the most bad faith way, racist and misogynist and bigots. He's going to say, my friend Neera Tanden, this is not a time for past grievances. We have too much work to do. I'm really proud to call you my friend. I think you're going to do a great job. He's going to be the most cuck motherfucker, even more so than he already is, in the entire universe. And it's just going to show those people even more that all you are warriors for the Democratic Party. Let me just give you one example. This week has been like the most amazing week of having the left and the right unite against Wall Street. Almost everybody across the spectrum supports what those Redditors are doing and is thrilled to see these hedge fund leeches suffering. And it has it's created a major opportunity to regulate, to legislate, to reform. And Ted Cruz, whatever you think of him, reached out by saying, I agree with AOC about this. So that was an opportunity for right and left to join together to do something that supposedly her main reason for existing as a political figure, which is fighting income inequality. And instead she turns around and says, fuck you, I don't want to work with you. You guys got me murdered. You're a white supremacist. And suddenly the two camps divide again. And over here you have the red team and over here you have the blue team cheering like morons at a fucking high school football game again because she ruined that movement because all she wants to do is attack Republicans and fortify the Democratic Party. That is what the left has become and they know it. And that's why all that's left for them to do is do things like talk about your personality and occasionally mine.
It is stunning to see AOC turn into Adam Schiff. It is stunning to me to see her just totally focus all her ire. And it started for me at the CARES Act. So last March, when she blamed the Republicans for the CARES Act instead of her own leadership who had just negotiated that bill. And so when everybody was making a big deal how she flapped her arms, but she was only flapping her arms and pointing her finger at the Republicans. And now here we are again. And when she's supposed to, we elected her to oppose Nancy Pelosi, she won't do it. And now when the time comes to actually stick it to Wall Street, she says no. And instead of doing that, she'd rather prop up in a most disingenuous way the Democratic Party. So she's there. The reason why they wouldn't do forced to vote was because it would have been injurious to the Democrats in the House who were against Medicare for all and would vote against it. So Nancy Pelosi said you can't do it, so they didn't. And so it's just stunning to me to see what is just manifest to everybody. And it's I've said this for years, Glenn, the United States is a country of adult children of alcoholic. They don't get mad at the person screwing you, right? Like the Justice Democrats who aren't doing what they said they would do and oppose Nancy Pelosi to get anything. They're not mad at that. They get mad at the person who points out that they're not doing what they said they would. And that's what adult children of alcoholics do. I know that very well. So that's the situation we're left in. And it's just amazing that I could become some kind of literally, I'm fucking a comedian in my garage in Pasadena. And it just goes to show you the bankruptness of those elected officials, the Justice Democrats, AOC, all of them, that I could have this kind of impact is because they are completely selling out their own campaigns, their own campaign workers, and everybody on the left. Go ahead, say whatever you want.
Yeah. I mean, the person who should have been leading that campaign was not Jimmy Dore. It should have been AOC.
Yes.
As you said, the reason it ended up being you is because it wasn't them. It should have been Justice Democrats. It should have been DSA. None of them do it because they're just soldiers of the Democratic Party. Look, I think, if you think about the excitement that came from AOC's election, let's remember she did not unseat a Republican incumbent.
Right.
She unseated a Democratic incumbent, a Democratic incumbent who was extremely loyal to the Democrat, who was one of Nancy Pelosi's favorite members of Congress, who would have been saying all the same stuff that she's saying now about the Republican insurrection, about white supremacy. Every last word that she utters would have come out of the mouth of Joe Crowley with complete comfort, except to the extent that he really didn't speak much. He just did, exercise his power in back rooms, but he would have been totally comfortable with all of her messaging. So the thing that amazed me was they humiliated AOC about a month ago, notwithstanding what a good soldier she is. They
We understand that a teenager has been shot. Is this the right way to handle this situation, given that tensions are already rising and emotions are already quite high?
Well, we're talking about the release of attempted murderers. You call them children, but we're talking about teenagers who stabbed other teenagers. We're talking about...
That's not my question, Deputy Mayor. I totally and fully understand that they have been accused.
I'm giving you the context.
I understand, but if I can, Deputy Mayor, I'm just going to interrupt you. I'm fully aware of...
I'm answering your
Deputy
question.
Mayor, I'm fully aware of what they've been...
Part of the deal was that there would be no celebrations. And the reason that these clashes are occurring is because exactly against the deal that there would be no celebrations celebrating the release of attempted murderers in East Jerusalem, in my city, where many people, many of the victims live side by side with the people who try to kill them. Part of the deal was that they would not have these celebrations. And if the clashes are occurring, it's exactly because of that. And we're also hearing the chants of the people.
Deputy Mayor, I'm just going to interrupt you because absolutely, and I've been speaking to Israeli officials who have laid out some of the crimes that these people have been accused of. As you say, they've been accused of all sorts of, crimes against various different individuals, and that's why they are in the prison. That's not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that they have now been released as part of this deal, and yet our camera crews, our teams on the ground who were in East Jerusalem, for example, were not allowed to enter the homes of some of these people who have been released, some of these prisoners, including yesterday when they tried to interview a 17-year-old boy who was taken away for throwing stones.
part of the deal, as I repeated, and I said earlier, and I will repeat again, was that this wouldn't be a celebration because the release of attempted murders, and when we're talking about a stone, we're talking about boulders that open people's heads. So let's put things in their place. And so part of the deal was that there wouldn't be fanfare around the release of attempted murderers, especially near the towns of the people that they tried to murder. And so if the police are preventing that, it's because it was part of the deal.
Welcome to a special edition of the Nick and CJ show. I'm one of your hosts. I'm CJ. What's up, Nick?
What's popping, my friends, my family? We got one hell of a double header for you guys today. Glenn Greenwald will be joining us here later. We have a show with Scott Ritter. I want to get right to that clip because apparently Palestinian children are the Hulk now. The Palestinian children, they are fucking Captain America over there. They're throwing boulders now. They got children that's strong enough to throw boulders. That's what they
boulders.
They got the fucking
marvelous.
Every single Palestinian children is forced to take the super soldier serum. Apparently, all these motherfuckers are Viltrumites. These motherfuckers are Clark Kent in the sky. These kids are throwing boulders at them, fam. I want you guys to understand.
This is so ridiculous.
These people justifying shooting a Palestinian teenager for showing emotion. Israel is shooting motherfuckers for showing emotions now, CJ. And people think they're not a genocidal apartheid state. That Palestinian over there showed happy emotions. Shoot them. And then she justified it. And the Nazi Zionists are so radicalized, they don't understand how crazy they sound to everyone else who is not white and European. And the Zionists. So she's just advocating on TV unapologetically her right and Israel's right to shoot a teenager for celebrating the return of a hostage, a child hostage. Because apparently the hostage can throw boulders. So now they can't even show emotions.
But let's take that, because you know how we like to do. We could do it either way. Let's take what she's saying as facts. These are attempted murderers, meaning they haven't been convicted. They are being accused. You mean family members? They're not celebrating the murder. A family member can't cry and show emotion about not seeing their family member. You can call them a murderer and terrorist all you want. They're not a terrorist to their family member. You see the depravity, the like, you understand, Nick, how you have to not be a human to say with a straight face, this is okay.
Zionism robs people of their humanity. But go ahead, CJ.
Yeah, because CNN covers it also. They cover it slightly different, but this is because I want to show it because this is one of the celebrations they're talking about. Because in the other video, it doesn't actually show the celebration. It's just talking about it. This is an actual celebration they have on video.
The moment a mother finally sees her daughter for the first time after 8 years in an Israeli.
I mean, I'm damn near in tears, Nick. I'm down there fighting back tears. You trying to tell me a mom, a person who carried this person in her for 9 months, can't show emotion?
Nope.
That is insane. Nick, I didn't know this until I was preparing for Glenn Greenwald. I didn't know this is insane. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Why do you guys think I refuse to condemn Hamas? Hamas is fighting against these monsters. And you guys want to condemn them? Imagine the headlines, CJ, if Hamas shot an Israeli teenager because they cheered the release of an Israeli hostage. Do you know what they would say about Hamas? That's Israel, fam. What would the Western society say if Hamas killed over 100 UN workers? And then when they confronted by it, they say, well, of course we killed them because they're pro-Israel. So we have the right to kill UN workers because they're pro-Israel. That is what Israel said. Israel said the UN workers that they killed deserve to die because they're all Hamas and they're pro-Hamas. Anyone who helped Hamas and assists Hamas is on their kill list. In Western media and white society is not along. Yeah, Israel said they got the right to kill UN workers. they got the more high ground over Hamas. Get the fuck out of here. That's what they said. Imagine the reaction if Hamas killed 67 journalists.
Jesus.
What would the Western media would say? In the Western media... Go ahead, CJ. Go ahead. I'll pass you.
I was just going to say Glenn is here. But like I was saying, I got this story preparing for Glenn to be here. And I mean, like I said, so this is real raw for me. So I'm literally trying to fight back tears for this segment in this particular video here. But I do want to bring in our guest because the topic is from one of his tweets, and I'll bring that up in just a second here. But friend of the show, and I would say just a fantastic journalist. Love to watch all of his content. I'm a fan, if we can say we're a fan in this space of Glenn. He's always even-handed. Every time I watch your content, Glenn, I'm gonna speak to you. It's always even-handed. I feel like he's intentionally trying to be fair, and you don't see that a lot in this space. So that's why I give him lots of respect for that. So let's bring in just internationally known journalist, and I would consider a great humanitarian. This is Glenn Greenwald. What's up, sir? How are you doing today, Glenn?
Hey, it's great to see you guys. Thank you so much for those kind words. As Nick knows, because we've had him on our show before, I'm going to harass you soon, Jay, to come on our show as well. But I'm a huge fan of what you guys do as well. We constantly recommend it, especially for people who don't often hear left-wing shows. I always tell them, like, if you want to hear really smart and fair and rational and information-based left-wing commentators and analysts, go watch this network. So I'm always happy to be here. I've been here before, and I'm thrilled to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to have you on. And sorry to interrupt, CJ, but I believe you have the next question here. I want to get your general reaction to what I've been calling this mass genocidal psychosis that's going on in the West right now. We're in another era, which is very common, where there's bipartisan consensus, where dissent is not allowed. You see this is very common in Washington, despite what the media say, where Washington always fight. No, it's very common that they make these consensus on issues, mostly foreign affairs. And when they do, the consequences of that is often very tragic for the working class and the global community. So I want to get your general thoughts on the slaughter we've been seeing, the historical slaughter. We just showed that clip of this lady justifying killing a Palestinian teenager for showing emotions. I want you guys to understand, this is a historic slaughter we are seeing. More kids have been killed in Gaza, 2.5 times more kids than the entirety of all the war zones combined last year, including Ukraine. So, Glenn, before we get started, and then CJ, I'll let you have the next question. Before you get started,
absolutely. Go ahead.
On this consensus, this insane genocidal psychosis we see in the Western media in Washington, D.C., if you want to take that on, Glenn.
Yeah, I think to me, it's the most important point is that, to be an American, to be an American citizen, an American journalist, an American commentator, obviously means you're going to be spending a lot of your time focused on wars, because the United States, if it does nothing else, fights wars continuously. I've lived in Brazil for 18 years. And one of the things that one day I kind of woke up and realized was, hey, you know what? Most countries actually don't go around in their media and in their government talking about which country they want to bomb next. It would be like a very strange thing to just openly start talking about which government you want to overthrow, which country you want to invade, which country you want to bomb. In Brazil, I mean, I don't know the last time Brazil has done that. Most countries, China, and yet in the United States, it's just so customary. I mean, you can barely remember, even in your own lifetime, all the wars, all the coups. But so on the one hand, it's always the case that whenever you look at war is by far the worst thing humanity can do to itself. It unleashes all of our worst, lowest, most barbaric and savage instincts. We have to dehumanize the other side by definition to accept state of war. People who kill each other have to suffocate their empathy and their compassion by dehumanizing. So it's in every case absolutely horrific. But it was clear to me from the very beginning, from the very first day after the Hamas attack on October 7th, that this war was going to be different, not just by degree, but in kind, in part because the nature of the Hamas attack and the way it was talked about almost ensured that the Israeli government had talked itself into, had talked its population into the need not just to go and seek vengeance, but this had been essentially the equivalent of the Holocaust, which for Jews worldwide is the North Star of aggression and victimization. And when you talk yourself into that instantaneously, of course, the things you're going to convince yourself that you're now entitled to do are basically limitless. But at the same time, the nature of the Israeli government has radically changed. And I think we don't talk about this enough. For as horrible as the Israeli government has been for many decades, this occupation of the West Bank, the blockade of Gaza, the constant bombing of innocent, harmless, trapped people, has been going on for decades. There's no way of romanticizing this better time in Israel on the one hand, but on the other, the current composition of the government is filled with people who, even until 5 years ago, were considered completely unthinkable, even within the Israeli context. And so you have a government that's filled with genuinely hateful, genocidal people, sick people who do not view the Palestinians as human, believe explicitly that both the West Bank and Gaza is theirs, part of greater Israel. And it was very much like the way the neocons had long wanted to overthrow Saddam, and then 9/11 became their moment to do it. The people in the Netanyahu government have been waiting for a moment like this. This is what they wanted. They wanted a pretext to be able to say, do you see these are savages? We need to kill them all. And right from the very beginning, Netanyahu said on October 8th, we are going to engage in a war unlike any previously seen. We are going to extract a cost that is unimaginable. Naftali Bennett wrote an essay in The Economist laying out what he thought their motive was, which was to put fear into the hearts of Israeli enemies for generations, so that even though they hate Israel with all of their being, they're so afraid of what Israel will do to them that they'll just meekly acquiesce that there's nothing they can do. And obviously, he said, to do that, you have to show the world and your enemies that you don't have any limits. Not humanitarian limits, not legal limits, not moral limits on what you're willing to do to entire populations. And you could see it coming, but now to actually watch it unfold. And I think it's so important to note it's not just in Gaza, but also in the West Bank, on a smaller scale in the West Bank. But what's going on in the West Bank, in many ways, I heard you guys just talking about the killing of people because of their crime of expressing joy that their children have come home. I mean, it's a decree by this occupying force that you are not permitted to engage in public displays of happiness upon seeing your relatives. And if you do, you'll be subject to arrest or killing in a country that doesn't belong to Israel's. It's not even like they're telling their Israeli Arab citizens this. They're telling this to Palestinians who live in the West Bank, that you're barred from celebrating publicly for having your teenage children who never were convicted of any crime released. And so you're not even at a level of savagery and barbarism in terms of the air campaign, in terms of the rate of civilian deaths, the attempt to destroy the healthcare system of Gaza, to destroy all the hospitals, the schools, to make Gaza uninhabitable in order to ethnically cleanse Gaza, to drive out the Gazans, to make them need to leave, want to leave to Egypt, to the Sinai, wherever, so that the Israelis can take it over. That is the real purpose of this war.
Now, to your point, Glenn, I'll pass it right to you, CJ. After this point, I'll pass it to you for the next question. There's a reason why I know it's not going to happen, but Biden and anyone who was complicit with approving of this slaughter, arming this slaughter, and giving Israel the A-OK to commit the slaughter of thousands of children, they should be held accountable for war crimes. Because during the lead up of this, you had high-ranking Israeli officials describe genocide, describe war crimes. They openly said that they view every single civilian in Gaza as part of Hamas, and they all complicit, and they're going to act accordingly. And as they were saying this stuff, that they're going to hold the civilian population accountable for Hamas, which is essentially a war crime. You had the United States and the corporate media saying Israel had the right to defend himself. So my point of view is that those people are just as complicit, because Israel was 100% clear of what their intentions was going in, and they are executing it. Everyone who repeated the nonsense that Israel was at war with Hamas, they are complicit with genocide. Why are they in the West Bank? if they were going to war with Hamas. If you saying that, you was a youthful idiot for genocide. I apologize. See, I'll pass to you for
No, that was great to add on. I do since you were alluding to or speaking about the topic, bring up your tweet, and this is where I first saw or learned about this agreement, or what was in this agreement, or part of this agreement being no celebration. I'll just read your tweet for those that are listening only. The atrocities in Gaza have received the most attention because of their sheer scale. But what Israel has been doing in the West Bank, that's not Israel's, is next level evil. Forbidding people to celebrate return of family members, then arresting or murdering them if they do. So my question, or what I want you to sort of speak to, is that for this sort of tidbit to come out about what Israel does, like how can they speak about some sort of moral high ground and also have sort of this sort of policy? So how can they walk that line, and are they being successful walking this line, in your opinion?
Right. So, as you guys know, because we've talked about it before and we've each separately talked about it a lot, I've been a very vocal opponent of the U.S. funding and arming of Ukraine to fight its war. And I've had on my show over the last 18 months many members of Congress, high-profile journalists, activists, presidential candidates who have also been opposed to this war in Ukraine, the U.S. participation in the war in Ukraine, who have been essentially saying, look, the United States has so many problems at home that its own citizens face that we can't afford to go around the world financing other countries' wars, the wars of foreign countries. And Ukraine's not the 51st American state. This is not our war. Why are we the ones paying for this? Why are we the ones fueling this? Now, most of the people who speak about it that way, not all, there's a lot of left-wing sentiment along those lines, but most people who speak about it just in those terms are people who generally are on the populist right, which is where, as you know, every no vote against Biden's billions of dollars to spend in Ukraine, that's where all the no votes came from, none from the Democratic Party. And then here we have exactly the same thing, which is a new war by a foreign country. And the first thing Joe Biden did, on top of the $4 billion a year we already give to Israel in various forms of aid, is turned around and asked Congress for another $14 billion in just to transfer to Israel to pay for its war. And all these people, not all, but many of them, who have been on my show, who have been out there in public saying we can't afford to finance other countries' wars, we can't and shouldn't go around just pouring out all these billions of dollars to the arms industry and to bomb makers and the like, suddenly have abandoned every single last one of those views, to say nothing of all their fake defense of free speech and opposition to cancel culture, as they've been cheering when people get fired for criticizing Israel, or when entire nations ban protests, or when Ron DeSantis bans pro-Palestinian student groups. Forget that hypocrisy. The hypocrisy on the merits. Suddenly it's all changed. And at first I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt and thought maybe they were emotionally moved by what happened on October 7th, or even they've been inculcated for so long to believe that financing Israel's wars is somehow in the self-defense or national interest of the United States, even though generals and so many American policymakers have long said that many of Israel's actions directly harm American national security, like expansion of settlements, because that's what raises anti-American sentiment. In fact, you know that since the war began in Israel, the State Department on 4 occasions at least have issued travel advisories warning Americans that they face a heightened risk of anti-American violent attacks against them wherever they go in the world, which is a very strange thing to have an American foreign policy that increases the likelihood as an American that you're going to be killed. That does not increase American security. That by definition undermines it.
Absolutely.
But what I have come to realize is that, in kind of being excessively generous, is that for a lot of people standing and applauding what Israel is doing, and also standing and applauding what Joe Biden is doing in financing, and I'm talking about people on the right, The reality is that many of them, not all, there are plenty of Israel supporters who are pained by what Palestinians are going through. I don't want to really paint with too broad of a brush, but there's a significant chunk of people on the right who are supporting all of this because they're the prism through which they see the world is that you have this kind of clash of civilizations. This was something very common after 9/11, where on the one side, you have the elevated, enlightened, superior Western culture, largely composed of white Western populations, white Christian and Jewish populations, the Judeo-Christian ethic, against the primitive, savage, barbaric Muslim hordes. They see immigration in Europe and in parts of the United States as part of this war on civilization, that we need to get these hordes of Muslims out of the West, or at least put them under control. And a lot of them are standing and cheering what Israel is doing, and Biden is paying for it, not because of any geostrategic consideration, but because they just genuinely don't believe that Arabs and Muslims are human or have equality or any humanity worth protecting. And they're happy to see them finally getting their due, finally getting what they deserve. And that tribal primal sociopathy is a significant factor in what's shaping a lot of this discourse.
Yeah, and I'm unapologetically anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, but I believe in strategic coalition building. So I would team up with an anti-war right winger. Now, these are very important distinctions. So because we're intelligent, we know how to move and operate. The best thing we can do, if we want to resist NATO, for example, we team up with anti-war right wingers to oppose those ideas. But I've been very vocal about warning people that because they oppose the Ukraine war, for example, now because in hindsight they're against the war on terror, that don't mean they're anti-imperialists. That don't mean they're against the empire. That don't mean they're against Western dominance. That means they're usually against this war. Maybe they are generally for less conflicts, but they are for Western domination, the domination of other cultures. And basically the way you put it there is they view the Palestinian culture, and even white liberals are guilty of this because they say these unhinged confessions on Twitter where they say, well, Palestinians don't believe in abortion. And I'm like, so what are you implying, that we should genocide them for that? So there's this general belief in Western imperial domination that even anti-war people believe in. You can be against the war, but for imperial domination. That's why there are these blind spots. That's why you have right wingers who want to imperially dominate China. That's for escalating war with China, because they may be anti-war, but they are for U.S. general imperial dominance. And one last thing I'll say, I'll pass it back to you, CJ, is I don't know how you feel about this, Glenn, but the rise of Nikki Haley is baffling to me. It has me in shambles. CJ, she's number 2 in Iowa right now.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm in shambles that this is even possible, because Nikki Haley and Joe Biden has the same foreign policy, the same exact foreign policy. And it's very interesting
on Ukraine, on China, on Israel, and on and on.
Yeah, and so it's interesting to see them do this tap dance where they got highly emphasized cultural war and a lot of ridiculous divides, because the Republicans, around 20% who support Nikki Haley, they are Joe Biden Republicans by all means, in all extents.
They love her.
Yeah, absolutely.
They always said on Morning Joe. After the debate, she gets all the high marks from the Democrats. And we're gonna get to her. Actually, I want to play the clip part of the clip of you and when you interview Vivek, and he talks about Nikki Haley. So we'll get to that soon. But I do want to talk or ask you about this part here, because this also caught my eye when I was preparing for this segment or this interview with you. And that's where you say the latest death toll in Gaza, according to The Economist, is 15,000. And then in this tweet, you go on to say, but that doesn't count the 7,000 who are missing, many of whom are buried under rubble. Thus, the true death toll may already have reached 20,000. More than a third of the dead are children. And you have the graphic here that shows the missing at 4,500 as women and children, men 2,500, and then if you're watching, you can see the death toll. But can you speak just to that number? I mean, you you are a world-renowned reporter. You've reported and studied on multiple conflicts that resulted in thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of deaths. But can you speak to what it means that we're speaking to possibly 20,000 dead in a matter of, I mean, since 50 days, 50 some odd days? Can you speak to that level in sort of in the space of how what you have studied about war and different conflicts? But go ahead.
Yeah. So let me just quickly say about the next point, which, I do think it's interesting that there is, I think, more space in American conservatism and in the populist right to apply these principles consistently, even when it comes to Israel now, in a way that I had never previously seen. So very influential voices on the right, like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Vivek Ramaswamy and Fair.org, which is considered a more right-leaning civil liberties group that vehemently condemned Ron DeSantis for shutting down this pro-Palestinian student group, have been saying not just, I'm opposed to censorship, I'm not going to suddenly become a censor because now Israel wants protection from criticism with censorship, I'm not going to get on board, but they're also on the substance asking, wait, why is this our war? Why are we the ones who are attaching ourselves to this? And in a way that when the entire world is, indignant about what they're watching have be done in Gaza, why are we embracing the Israelis and saying we're going to pay for it all? That seems very contrary to our interests. So I think there are a lot of people in media and politics who pride themselves for some reason on only speaking to those who agree with them on every single last issue. And I understand pragmatically why people do that. It's a much easier course of action. It's a much easier path. It can be a very lucrative one in our media, but it doesn't achieve much. And I think trying to carve out space in different places to build majoritarian coalitions is your basic responsibility. Otherwise, you're just interested in media branding or self-image if you don't care about crafting together different coalitions on issues you claim to really care about. On the issue of this kind of substantive question of the war toll, I think probably the worst thing I've seen Joe Biden do, and obviously he has a long career of sick, hideous things. I mean, he's the architect of the drug war. He was a major figure in fortifying the prison industrial complex, ensuring that people stay in jail for longer for all kinds of crimes. He was arguably the key Democrat in Congress that ensured that the authorization to use military force in Iraq was passed. So he has a long list of sins and crimes. I think the worst thing he's ever done is stood up 2 or 3 weeks after the Israeli bombardment began and said, don't trust these numbers that are coming out of Gaza in terms of how many people are being killed because this comes from Hamas and you can't trust anything Hamas says. And there's been this attempt, we're now in a position where it's not just Hamas is the new Hitler. Everyone we ever want to go to war with becomes the new Hitler. Everyone now. I mean, just 18 months ago, Putin was the new Hitler. It's like, oh, there's now Hamas is the new Hitler, and Ahmadinejad in Iran was the new Hitler, and then he left office after his second term ended, just waltzed out of office and retired to private life. And Gaddafi was the new Hitler, and Assad. You go on. And it's like at some point you're really trivializing what Nazism was if everybody's the new Hitler. So now we're in this kind of position where Hamas has to be worse than Hitler. At least the Nazis didn't do X like Hamas does. At least the Nazis, you're seeing this Nazi apology in order to claim that everything that you put the word Hamas on is just such pure and unmitigated evil. And that's what Biden contributed to, is if it comes from Hamas, has anything to do with Hamas, it means that it's just a lie and you ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist. And even The Economist, I have to say, has done a very good job on this point, because The Economist editorially is extremely pro-Israel. They've been supporting the Israeli war in Gaza. They've been supporting Biden's paying for that Israeli war and embracing it in every way like they've always done. But they've been putting together long, detailed arguments about why these numbers are highly likely to be far more accurate than inaccurate, including the fact that in the past, when Israel has bombed Gaza, the worst previous one being, although it's a fraction of what's done now, in 2014, that the numbers coming out of Gaza about the number of people killed ended up being verified and confirmed when independent organizations after the bombing would go into Gaza and they would be able to document who are these people who died. Here's the autopsies. Here's where they were buried. Here's the hospital records. These are all, every time there's an investigation, these numbers prove to be accurate. And if anything, even Biden administration officials admitted in Congress and to media leaks that these numbers are almost certainly undercounting the number of people killed in Gaza because there's so many people buried under the rubble. So when the Gazan Health Ministry, or if you want to call it Hamas Health Ministry, announces the number of people dead, they're counting how many people are passing through the morgue, through the hospital and the morgues. But when there's huge numbers of human beings buried beneath rubble that the Gazans have been incapable of removing because they don't have fuel and they're prohibited from having large machinery that's necessary to cranes and tractors and the like to remove the rubble. So there's human beings, thousands of them trapped under the rubble who aren't part of this official count. And that's why The Economist is saying that even though the official count is 15,000, it's almost certainly surpassed 20,000 human beings in just 7 weeks, a third of whom at least are children, a third of those 20,000 people are children, which is, of course, 50% of the Gazan population, because they are just buried under rubble. And I've seen videos, I'm sure you guys have seen videos of people who are alive or sort of alive with their hands sticking out of the rubble, and their relatives can't get to them because there's no way to remove they bombed enormous residential buildings that have nothing in them but apartment building, just apartments where people live. And so the amount of death and destruction in Gaza is so, I mean, honestly, I have a lot of people in my life who love Israel, who support Israel, who were, emotionally traumatized by October 7th. And I tried to give them the space to have that. I don't believe in terminating friendships over political disagreements. But honestly, in this case, like as much as I've seen, as much as I've covered, as much as I've talked about and written about, I do think there's something about this that's particularly savage and barbaric that I do have a hard time being able to set aside or to treat as just any other political difference supporting this. Because this is barbarism on a scale. This is a cruelty on a scale unlike what we've seen in terms of the sheer numbers.
Yeah, man. And the reason why I'm so engaged in foreign policy is because I grew up during the Iraq War. I followed and we've seen some shit. I'm sure Glenn's seen much worse. And everyone who's seen a lot of shit, people like Mark, Kimberly, Glenn, like people have been in this game for a long time saying that we never seen slaughters like this. And this is what with us having the full knowledge of what went on in Yemen and Iraq, for example. You guys see this? Like the per day stat. And I mentioned this when we were talking about the journalist that was killed here very soon, where you had Israel killed 67 journalists in 50 days. That's more than the entirety of World War II, the entirety of the Vietnam War. They already killed more journalists. You got 136 children killed per day already. So yes, there was a lot of people killed in Iraq, a lot of people killed in Yemen, but the pace in which we are seeing this slaughtered is unprecedented in modern human history. Like, this is unbelievable. Now you also have this that I wanted to share as well. I kind of covered this as well yesterday. Anyone who believes the lie that Israel is going after Hamas, you either have to be the biggest youthful idiot in the world, or you have to acknowledge that the Israeli military, the least efficient army, the least costly army in human history, either one of those two. And they usually spin it as the exact opposite. They said Israel is the most cautious, the most pro-civilian army. So I don't believe these numbers for 1 second, because Israel has been known to inflate the amount of Hamas fighters that has been killed. So for the record, I don't believe these numbers. But let's do it both ways, CJs. Let's believe the numbers they claim. Let's say they killed 1,000 to 2,000 Hamas fighters, which I absolutely don't believe. But let's say they did. You guys understand, with the thousands of children killed, around 20,000 probably dead. This is a civilian death rate of around 95%. In what war and what conflict is this ever acceptable? And at what point do we stop believing Israel at face value when they say they're at war with Hamas, when they got a 95% at least civilian death rate, and that's using their numbers? CJ and Glenn.
Let me just interject one thing quickly there.
Go ahead.
Look at this math.
All right,
So The stated goal of Israel is to destroy Hamas, to eliminate it from Gaza, and to eradicate it. Not to weaken it, not to degrade it. They've been very clear about this. In fact, they've said it's not to weaken it, it's not to undermine it, it's not to erode it. It's to destroy it entirely, to make sure there's no Hamas left in Gaza. So the question then becomes, well, how do you do that? What does that mean? At a bare minimum, it presumably means that you want to go and kill all the people that you believe are Hamas militants who work as part of Hamas, who are fighters for Hamas or part of the government anyway. So if you take these figures at face value, which, as you said, come from Israel, these are Israeli military estimates.
Yep.
They've killed, they say, between 1,000 and 2,000 Hamas fighters thus far. And they say there are 30,000 Hamas fighters total. So this means that they have killed 1/15 of all Hamas fighters. And the price for this so far is, let's be generous again and call it 15 rather than 20,000 deaths.
Sure.
At this rate of civilian death, meaning 14 civilians for every one Hamas militant, this is going to mean that if you're going to kill the next 28,000 Hamas militants, the military force of Hamas, you have 28,000 more to go. At the rate that you're killing, you're going to end up multiplying by a factor of 15 the number of civilian deaths that have already happened, which is 15,000. So you're talking about something that is approaching 200,000, if not actually exceeding it, starting to approach 300,000. And if you're going to have a war that kills several 100,000 people out of a population of 2.2 million, I won't even engage in debates any longer about whether the word genocide is appropriate. I don't know what else to compare that to.
What else is?
In terms of, I mean, just look at the math.
And that's my logic I use. If my radical ass, well, I say if you guys don't believe Hamas and Palestinians have the right to armed resistance, who does? What standard are you guys allowing the ruling class to set for armed resistance? And I don't engage in oppression Olympics. I believe it's counterproductive to see who more oppressed, indigenous Americans, Palestinians, black. That's counterproductive. It really doesn't matter, right? But if you don't believe the Palestinians have the right to fight against oppressive governments, you're essentially saying no one does. You're essentially.
Well, can I interject there too? Because it is true that there are a lot of Palestinians who do not identify with Hamas, who don't like Hamas. Yeah. When Hamas was elected in 2005, they got 44% of the vote. The more moderate Fatah party got 41% of the vote. So there have been efforts on the part of Palestinian civic society to organize nonviolent protests to end the occupation. So what were those things? One time they wanted to have a symbolic march in front of the gate, the thing that keeps them imprisoned inside Gaza. And as they approached the gate, the Israelis gunned them down, even though they were nonviolent. But the most significant tactic they've been trying to use is a boycott of Israel. Yes. Don't buy, modeled after the boycott that helped bring down the apartheid regime in South Africa in the 1980s when the United States was supporting that. I just watched this farewell party that Ronald Reagan gave for Pat Buchanan when he was leaving the White House in 1987. He praised Reagan's courage and listed a bunch of things Reagan did, one of which was sanctioning or vetoing a sanctions bill that the U.S. Congress had enacted to impose on South Africa to help weaken the apartheid regime, with which, of course, both the United States and Israel was allied. But what they tried, and they're still trying, this nonviolent means of protesting against this oppression, which is, let's have a boycott of Israel modeled after the one in South Africa. And what did the West do in response? They enacted laws saying that the boycott of Israel is inherently anti-Semitic. And because it's anti-Semitic in the West, it is illegal. You cannot advocate for it. You cannot organize around it. And in the United States, where at least we have the First Amendment, they've tried circumventing that by enacting laws saying that if you want to work for the state, you have to sign a pledge vowing that you do not support a boycott of Israel. So the Palestinians have tried nonviolent means and still are doing so. And the West made it illegal for the world to participate. So leaving them, in essence, with nothing but a violent response and all these people on the right who love to, venerate these old virtues of masculinity and who talk about the importance of nationalism. What would other people do? Anyone in the world who would tolerate decades of occupation, humiliating, brutal occupation, and a blockade of their country by a foreign army, and not at some point revolt against it? Which group of people would do that? And I think that's the key point is, of course, when a country is invading your land and occupying it, as the Israelis are doing, nobody would argue that armed resistance against that occupying force is unjust. And a lot of the people being released are people who used violence against IDF soldiers occupying their land. But even beyond that, before you even get to violent resistance, they've had nonviolent resistance, all of which the West has declared off limits and inappropriate, and so anti-Semitic, in fact. So there's whatever option the Palestinians try and use to win their sovereignty or their freedom or their self-governance, the West pronounces that it's inappropriate.
All of what we're all describing and what you're talking about, Glenn, sounds like a colonial settler project to me. So when people say, like, oh, well, they're not killing civilians, they're trying not killing to kill civilians. What if the point is to kill civilians? That is the point, to kill civilians, ethnic cleansing. Because if you're a colonial settler project, how you want these people gone, however, whether by death or whether you have them escape up to Egypt or some other Arab country, the point is to get them out of here by any means. And that's also also to speak to the death toll of children when they say they're indiscriminately killing children. To me, the inability not to have so many child deaths, to me, also speaks to that this is a colonial settler project, because what does killing children mean to a colonial settler project? It means no future for the population that you're trying to displace, kill, or replace. So could you sort of, if anybody wanted to chime in on that, and then we can get to the Vivek video and then the journalists before we get you out of here. But if you wanted to chime in, Nick, it sounded like you did.
Yeah, I actually wanted to.
Or if you had something to bring up, if you want to bring up, my bad.
This up in the light of what we was talking about, because all these things, like seeing the child murders, seeing Israel be so ineffective, the raid of Al Shifa Hospital was deeply embarrassing for everyone involved at the pro-Israel side, where Israel not only failed to produce evidence that Hamas headquarters were there, but they did it in the most comical way possible, where they was caught planting evidence, having the most cartoonishly bad propaganda that even the BBC and CNN couldn't get behind. So because of this, we are seeing, and you can speak on them whether you agree with this or not, Glenn, but I've never seen the tide turn against Israel like this before. Like Israel had PR disasters before, and there have been moments before where I was like, yes, now the tide's going to turn, and it didn't happen. Like that happened quite a few times, but it's different now. Maybe I'm being delusional, but we are seeing something we've never seen before, which is leading Zionists to freak out and revert to their natural tendency of authoritarianism, which we describe on our channel. The natural tendencies of capitalists, of Western chauvinists, and they believe in rights when everything goes well. When you go along with the wars, when profits are high, when morale of the country is high, then you get the rights. But the second you start speaking out against the wars, then all of a sudden you see the rights are temporary. So I don't know if you saw this, Glenn, but Chuck Schumer is giving a very important speech today. He's giving a speech because anti-Semitism is on the rise, and anti-Semitism is a crisis now, Glenn. It's a crisis in this country. And so this is what Chuck says. Anti-Semitism is a crisis in this country. As the highest ranking Jewish elected official, I feel compelled to speak about it. I'll be giving...
So brave.
I'll be giving a major address on it tomorrow. And Glenn, I want to get your general thoughts on this, because I've been like a media watchdog. We do propaganda reports, and it's been unbelievably bizarre. Well, I should say bizarre because it's actually common. I've seen the same segment on MSNBC that I see on Fox News, where they say Jewish students on campus feel uncomfortable because Palestinian people are protesting for free Palestine. People are saying from the river to the sea, and now Jewish students are feeling uncomfortable. And I'm seeing this very concerted manufactured crisis of anti-Semitism linking your support of the Israeli state with of anti-Semitism. Anyway, I don't want to beat the dead horse. I want to get your thoughts on this coordinated effort. And CJ, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'll pass to your question next.
No. Go ahead.
This coordinated effort to use anti-Semitism, and a lot of the people on the right engaging in this as well, to silence and dissent and free speech. I want to get your general thoughts on that, and then we can move to CJ.
Yeah, I mean, what you guys both were just saying about the intent of this war. Obviously, the Israelis have the military capability to kill a lot more Palestinians if they wanted to. They could, completely carpet bomb Gaza. What they're doing is not that far away. 60% of architectural structures in northern Gaza are in some way compromised, if not fully destroyed. You're talking about the majority of the buildings in Gaza City and northern Gaza are in some way damaged. That, it's hard to start drawing very fine distinctions between what carpet bombing is and what has happened here. But if the Israelis wanted to, they could just immediately destroy every building, and they're not. And I think in part it's because they do still have to be concerned to some extent about world opinion.
Yeah.
They are far less concerned than they have been in the past. And they also know, and I don't know if you guys saw this, but there's a video of Netanyahu sitting in his home, and he didn't know he was being taped, and he talked what is so obviously, what I have to say in his defense is true. He mocked the idea that the Americans would ever stop Israel. He said, do you know how easy it is for me to manipulate the American public? And but I do think that the extent of opposition to Israel that sometimes does penetrate media outlets, that you're seeing worldwide protests of hundreds of thousands of people in major American and Western cities and cities in the Middle East, is not really, I've never seen gigantic, continued, enduring, sustained protest in defense of Palestinians and against Israel to this extent ever. And I think it's I think in part it's because what we started off by saying, that this is not like anything that we've seen before, that it's just, if you're a decent person by definition, even if you support Israel, you're going to look at this and feel a deep sense of disturbance and horror and discomfort. But I also think we have to remember that, and this is one of the things that you learn every year as you get older, is that things that you assume are kind of second nature because you lived through the history are things that to other people every year, more and more of them are just these dead historical events that they never lived through and therefore know nothing about. And the reality is that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has more or less been on the back burner, certainly in American political debates and Western political debates. I think that's part of why Hamas did what they did, to say, we're over here and you can't go around signing these peace deals with Israel and Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates without pretending that we don't exist. And so I think for many, many people, younger people who started paying attention for the first time to politics only because of Donald Trump, this is the first real look they're getting at Israel. And the first reminder of the fact that the Democratic Party are just as supportive of the Israelis as the Republican Party is. And I think a lot of people are having their worldview disturbed. I'm seeing this genocide, and then I'm seeing this person over here who I've been told was a good, decent person, continuously not only applauding it in Joe Biden, but saying that they're going to fund it. And I think it is starting to change consciousness. But the reality is, Israel is a very powerful military. It's a nuclear armed power, the only one in that region. It is true that they have a stranglehold on American public opinion for all kinds of reasons. Americans are a very pro-Israel population. Evangelicals are fanatical Israel supporters, many of them. Obviously, American Jews are. And then you add on to that this kind of, and the national security state, but you add on to that this narrative about the status of Jews throughout history, which there's a lot of truth to, that historically Jews have been one of the most persecuted people in all throughout the world. This is something that every Jew is taught, and that we need Israel because if things go wrong again in the country we're living to, we have to have a safe place we can go to. And there is an element of truth to that. But there's also a big element of truth to the fact that Israel is no longer the victim, nor are American Jews a victim group. And every time American political leaders want to seize more power over how they can imprison people, how they can spy on people, how they can control speech, they need to seize on a crisis.
Yeah.
Obviously, that happened after 9/11. It happened in the COVID pandemic. It happened with the January 6th riot. It happened with the war in Ukraine, with the 2020 election. Each one of these is seized upon to say we need greater and greater powers. And this idea that now American Jews are somehow uniquely endangered, even though American Jews, I think probably the United States is the best place for Jews to live in of any country in history. Of course, this is a fabricated crisis that Jews can't walk outside safely. That, there are few groups I'd rather be if I had to pick and choose than an American Jew.
Glenn, I listened to your argument. Glenn, I when they was pushing this, I was like, what examples are they using? They seriously did a segment on Morning Joe where this privileged younger white woman who went to like Columbia, went to Ivy League, all these good schools. Her example of rising anti-Semitism was she walked past a Palestinian protest and she heard someone say to the river and sea. That's their crisis, Glenn. That they're hearing chant.
But you know what, Nick, in defense of liberals, and I rarely begin a sentence with that phrase, like at least liberals have kind of been using this framework over the last, say, 6 or 8 years, where they're saying, oh, if someone says something on a college campus that makes trans people or Black people or Latinos or immigrants or whomever, whatever member of a minority group, Muslims, unsafe because they don't like hearing that opinion, they have the right to be protected and to be made safe by not allowing that opinion to be expressed. It's the people on the right. They've written entire books. They built media careers mocking this, saying, oh, you poor little snowflakes. Time to realize you're an adult. You don't have the right to go around and not hear views that make you uncomfortable and have your little security blanket. Life is about confronting ideas that make you uncomfortable. And now suddenly they sound like, every social justice warrior with purple hair that I've ever heard.
I love that you're taking these people on, Glenn.
I've largely been in agreement with these people because I'm a civil libertarian. I believe in free speech, and those happen to have been among my allies over the last 6 years. So I've heard everything they've said over the last 6 years. I remember it. And so when they turn around and say, do an exact 180 on all of these issues, it's very visible to me and it's very nauseating to me. And I can't help but constantly rub that in their faces because that is the sort of craven hypocrisy I just can't stand.
Go ahead, CJ.
Yeah. So a couple of things. I just want to shout out this other headline before I get to Nick's video I want to play next. This headline here, we have completed the murder of all residents of the kibbutz. I think I'm saying it right. Chilling warning picked up by Israeli intelligence months before October 7th. And your tweet is basically speaking to there were reports that there was something upcoming, like an attack upcoming. So does this speak to, because what people in the United States may not know is that in Israel, Netanyahu doesn't have a real good reputation, and some of his
approval rating,
right, and some of his most recent dip is surrounding what happened on October 7th. Now I know because I read the entire tweet thread. Some people say this could mean that this was some sort of inside job on October 7th. I know you speak to it in this tweet, but what say you about this sort of intelligence that they were warned and how this could have been some sort of inside job? What is your opinion on that?
I personally, especially journalistically, don't like to associate myself with these kind of vast conspiracy theories until there's a lot of evidence to support them. just because I think it's important to be cautious in an evidentiary way. And there are other explanations. There were, before 9/11, there were a lot of reports that the Bush administration was warned of a likely mass attack happening in the United States from Al-Qaeda, and they just got ignored. I mean, they were serious enough to reach the president's office. So but that to me doesn't mean that I think the United States knew 9/11 was coming and purposely allowed it to happen. I think a lot of times these things are nuanced. We have a lot of evidence that there were FBI informants in the groups that led the January 6th riot. It doesn't quite mean to me that the FBI was the force behind it. A lot of times it could mean that they kind of let it happen through negligence or even through a kind of subliminal sense that maybe would be okay or even advantageous. The reality is that when you have these gigantic intelligence apparatuses, you have, this story was about a fairly low-level intelligence operative. She clearly found the right information because what she was saying was pretty much describing perfectly what actually ended up happening months in advance. And she even warned that it was likely it could be in association with the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War. And this happened on the one day after the 50th anniversary. Clearly, she was onto something. Why this ended up being dismissed and kind of getting ignored by senior intelligence officials, I don't know. But I do think it's important to remember that, and this has gotten lost, is Gaza is probably the most surveilled place on the planet.
Yes.
The Israelis have the most sophisticated, nefarious spying technology in the world. Things like Pegasus, but I mean, there's a lot of Israeli high-tech firms that have developed extremely invasive spying platforms. The way Jeff Bezos' wife marriage ended was because the Saudi crown prince was able to hack into his WhatsApp and discover his affair and leaked it. And that was using Israeli spying technology. Yeah, that is a proven fact. And
I didn't know that.
The Gazans, I think one of the saddest thing about the reality for Gazans is, people talk about an open air prison. I don't know if what people understand the reason why that phrase is used and why it's literally true is because Gaza City had an airport that the Israelis bombed and warned, if you try and rebuild it, we're going to bomb it again. So the Gazans can't leave. They're trapped inside Gaza. All of their borders are controlled by Israel, with the exception of one that's controlled by the U.S.-supported Egyptian dictator. So they're trapped. They cannot leave by land, by sea, or by air. And they're just constantly surveilled by the Israelis, who are among the most sophisticated spying agencies in the world. When we did the Snowden reporting, the NSA considered Israel one of the top 3 security threats, cybersecurity threats against the NSA, even though the NSA gives huge amounts of data to Israel about Americans, about everyone that it spies on. The Israelis spy on the United States almost more effectively than anybody. And the question always was, how is it that this trapped population that's completely surveilled was able to pull off an attack of this magnitude without ever being detected? Well, it turns out it was detected. It just never quite got acted on for reasons that I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, because if you think about it, go ahead, Nick. If you're going to chime in before I get to the video,
I apologize again, CJ. But before we get to that video, I just want to share.
Oh my God, I'm seeing a Nick on video, and I'm seeing a Nick over here. There's so much Nick going on.
That's how vain I am, Glenn. That's how vain I am. I just like seeing multiple versions.
But go ahead, Nick, if you wanted to share something.
Go ahead, Nick. Sorry,
you're not going to be long, but I just want to add to this. And my general take on October 7th is similar to everything regarding Israel-Palestine. I don't believe literally anything Israel says. I don't believe anything the United States government says. That don't mean I don't deny the event. It means I am waiting for more information. And right now, based on what I am seeing, there's going to be a lot of anger if the truth ever comes out. I don't know what that truth is. I just know for a damn fact, everything they told us is not true. For example, you still hear to this day pro-Israeli, pro-genocide people repeat the 1400 numbers. Like, you remember when Aaron Mate
I saw that.
Chris Coons, and then Chris Coons got offended because Aaron Mate corrected him when Chris Coons was inflating the amount of Israelis that was killed, because you got to be precise when you talk about this kind of stuff. And they still use the 1400 numbers. They still, to this day, without getting their YouTube channel demonetized, without getting their Instagram page banned, without getting their Twitch channel banned, like my personal Twitch channel was banned, our Ben Twitch channel was banned for a little bit. So without that happening, they just repeat the fact that Hamas beheaded babies. And that's been proven false. Even the IDF had to roll that back. And now the IDF in Israel now rolled back the amount of civilian death to 900. You guys see how that
What?
number?
I didn't know that. No, I did not know that. So you're breaking news to me. But go ahead.
Yeah. You guys see how that number?
Well, what they did was
Go ahead,
they revised the total of number of people killed from 1,400 to 1,200, and then for a long time we didn't hear the breakdown of how many of those people who were killed were active duty soldiers in the IDF or the police, which of course is a crucial number because that tells you how many civilians were killed. And then they still never really released an official list, but Haaretz and other Israeli newspapers have the count at 1,200 people total dead, 350 of whom or 360 of whom are active IDF soldiers, which means 950 were killed who were not in the military. I'm sorry. Yeah, 950 people were killed who are not in the military, but some of them might have been police or whatever in the security state. She's talking about in the hundreds of civilians that were killed, and there's definitely some people who were killed in the crossfire where the IDF attacked or where other armed people who were Israeli attacked to try and kill some of the Hamas people, soldiers who had invaded. So we don't have an exact number, but it's nowhere near 1,400. CNN and Dana Bash also repeated that number just a week ago, even though the official Israeli count was already lowered. I do think there's evidence, because I've seen videos where there are clear atrocities committed by Hamas against Israeli civilians. I don't have any doubt about that. And to me, it doesn't make a huge difference what the exact number is, but I do think accuracy is vital, especially from the people who constantly say that they're fighting against disinformation in their news agencies. You can't play around with those numbers because it helps your argument in the moment to say 1,400 instead of 800.
Yeah. And the last two things I'll read here, I'll just read a tweet here. Israel quietly reduced the October 7th civilian deaths to 900, the equivalent to just 2 days of the Palestinian civilian deaths and the Israeli 40-plus days of bombing. The full story hasn't come out. That's where I'm at. I'm waiting to get the real details and data. But as the Harris investigation revealed, many of the October civilian deaths were from Israel shooting on their own. And the last thing I want to read, I believe Gray Zone and Max is very credible, and they've been reporting on this to much dismay of the Israeli lobby and Zionists. They've been really going after Max because of this story that Gray Zone been on top of. And I'll just read this last time I'll share, and I'll pass it back to you, CJ. We can get to the journalist story. Max says, as evidence of friendly fire killing on October 7th mounts, Israel planned to bury the cars containing important forensic evidence which were burned in southern Gaza. We covered this. Remember the cars with the Israelis were burned alive in them, and it was revealed that a lot of those cars were burned by Apache helicopters. So now Israel, now for the first time ever, is now planning to bury the cars, CJ. And they're like, we want to honor the Israelis that fell, so we're going to bury the cars. What the fuck? Why the fuck would you do that? And many people explain how that's an environmental hazard when all the car fumes and all the toxins, all the materials in the engine seeps into the oil, to the soil. Like, there's so many reasons why this is stupid. So Max is saying here, and I think he has a good argument, it will shred the cars completely before burying them. This is what their argument was, to be environmentally safe as possible. That's what they were saying, even though that's not environmentally safe. But the important point is they want to bury the evidence of them killing their own people. And their explanation is so absurd. They're saying they're doing it to be pro-environment, and they also saying they want to honor the families. What's getting absurd? So I'm not saying anything. I'll just put data points together, and the Israelis have something to hide. So Glenn, you can chime in if you want, or we can pass it back to CJ. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, go ahead, CJ, and I'll address everything together.
Yeah, let's play this video because we're still standing on Israel. We're just kind of bringing in a different component, and that's the journalist component of this. Nick puts it together perfectly in a 2 minutes, so let's play that and then we'll discuss.
Israel has killed 67 journalists ever since October 7th, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, which was founded in 1992. This is the deadliest period for journalists ever since they've been tracking that data. These are truly historic war crimes we are witnessing Israel commit right now. In World War II, 69 journalists was killed over the period of 6 years. In Vietnam, it took 20 years for 63 journalists to be killed. Israel matches those numbers easily in just 50 days. Can you guys imagine the outrage if Hamas killed 67 journalists and over 100 UN workers? Israel purposely targeted journalists at a rate we never seen before because they want to commit their genocide in darkness. This isn't anything new because Israel has a history of targeting journalists. Just last year, Israel killed prominent Palestinian journalist Shireen Abdul-Akleh in cold blood. You had multiple investigations that outline how Israel purposely targeted Shireen Abdul-Akleh because her prominence in reporting on Israeli war crimes. And Israel, doing what they do best, lied about the killing of Shireen Abdul-Akleh, said that she was killed by Palestinian gunfire in a shootout. And just like what's going on in Gaza, the Western media and the Biden administration repeated the lies coming out of Israel regarding Shireen's killing. Not only that, you have Biden that shielded Israel from any accountability and blocked ICC investigations into Israel over her killing. The United States, UK, and Israel are the new axis of evil, and they are the #1 threat to a free press in the world right now.
Great video by Nick. Do you want to sum up the video, Nick, and the story?
Just for the sake of time,
for Glenn.
We appreciate Glenn spending time with us. I'm gonna share this headline here. And once again, these numbers keep changing. The number I saw recently was 67 journalists was killed. Nearly 60 journalists and media workers, and this is from the NPR. I laughed when I saw the headline. Nearly 60 journalists and media workers killed since the start of Israel-Hamas war. Killed by who, NPR? You guys see how they can't even mention it? Why reporting on it? You had to dig into the article to realize that Israel's killing these workers. They do it all the time, but I don't want to spend too much time ranting on this. I just want to get your general thought on, you had Western media outlets decry Putin as a war criminal for quote-unquote targeting journalists, even though the United States went after Julian Assange. They helped Israel kill Shireen Abdul-Akleh. But despite the outrage they had over Putin on this, you had Israel just indiscriminately killing journalists. And then when approached by this, they say, yeah, we killed the journalists because they are benefiting and they are helping Hamas. Anyone who helps Hamas is a target, and they don't even apologize for it. So anyway, sorry, I want to get your general thoughts on the targeting of journalists and the quiet and the silence from people like Jim Acosta, for example, who claim to care so much about the freedom of press under Trump, for example. Well, go ahead, Glenn, if you want have anything to add to that.
I think the reference that you made to Putin is a really important one. It was one I was actually going to make in response. About 6 months ago, the countries in the BRICS alliance, which is a coalition of various countries, including China and India, Brazil, South Africa, and Russia, had a summit meeting in Johannesburg in South Africa. And all of the leaders of those countries attended except for President Putin of Russia, because he is currently charged as a war criminal by The Hague, by the International Criminal Court. And the South Africans said, we're furious about it, but we're a signatory to this convention and we have to turn him over if he's on our soil, even though we don't think he's a war criminal. And so he couldn't travel to South Africa and to many, many other countries. He was supposed to go to Brazil. And at first Lula said, I'm not turning Putin over to the International Criminal Court. Yeah. People were, enraged, and he had to walk that back and say, well, we'll consider the request. So here you have Putin, who's being officially and legally treated by as a war criminal, led by the United States, that refuses to even sign the International Criminal Court Convention, and in fact, enacted a law authorizing the use of military force to rescue any American service members or American officials who get put in The Hague, leading the way. And yet, by every metric, what Israel doing in Gaza in terms of killing civilians and journalists and everyone else is infinitely more extreme than anything that the Russians have done in Ukraine. That's number one. Number two is, every single one of these data points about numbers of journalists killed or whatever, they have built-in excuses for all of them. Oh, it's Hamas's fault. They use human shields. all of these. And one of the things I saw at the very beginning that really disturbed me was I saw American supporters of Israel essentially saying there is no such thing as a journalist in Hamas because Hamas doesn't allow press freedom. Anyone who claims to be a journalist and who is reporting in Gaza is automatically and necessarily lying and doing propaganda for Hamas because Hamas is a totalitarian regime. And therefore, what they were essentially saying is they're fair game.
Jesus
Just
Christ.
like they were trying to say that the medical staff at these hospitals were complicit in allowing Hamas to operate from those hospitals. So now doctors and nurses and orderlies in hospitals, among the most noble people on the planet trying to save people's lives, are also now fair military targets because somehow they're in. The minute you say someone is complicit with Hamas, somebody is propagandizing for Hamas, you're essentially automatically saying that Israel has the right to murder them because the goal, according to Israel, is to destroy Hamas. And therefore, anybody found or alleged to be associated with Hamas can be murdered. So, yes, there are obviously attempts to target journalists. They've bombed their homes and had their entire families extinguished, some of whom were part there and got killed with their families, others of whom were on the street reporting, and they learned that their wife and their parents and their 5 children were all killed by an Israeli bomb on their house. But there's a built-in excuse that these aren't really journalists, that these are propagandists for Hamas and are fair game. And, of course, that this is all Hamas's fault because Hamas uses these people as human shields. So any Israeli killing of a civilian automatically gets chalked up to Hamas, not to Israel.
Yeah, the ICC has done unbelievable damage to their credibility, fam. Like unbelievable damage to their credibility over the last few years. Do you guys understand that Israel has killed more children than they accuse Putin of kidnapping? So I don't know if you guys know the story behind this, but the reason why the ICC charged Putin as a war criminal because they charged him with kidnapping Ukrainian children. They didn't charge him with actually like killing civilians, because if you do that, then you got to charge the United States, their politicians. So what they did was very weaselly. They had to find a way to charge Putin with a war crime that doesn't indict their own people. So they had to find something very weird and obscure. So they say he kidnapped children. You guys know that was based on a Yale report that was funded by the State Department. And in that report, they admit, if you read it, and they admit that no child was harmed. And every single child that was relocated from a war zone, which is a very common tactic, was returned back to their family. So that was buried in the report that was funded by the State Department. So the State Department funded memo or whatever, then was treated as gospel by the ICC. Then they labeled Putin as a war criminal because a U.S. State Department funded document. And remember, every children that Putin was accused of kidnapping, which he didn't, Israel killed more children. But meanwhile, the ICC has not put an arrest warrant on Netanyahu. Isn't that interesting, Glenn?
Nor will they ever. Nor will they ever. I mean, it's obviously anybody who tried to accuse the Israelis of being a war criminal would instantly be condemned as being an anti-Semite. That goes without saying. The United States and Israel have always been exempt from the laws of war, from the rules they impose on others. They're exempted legally and according to Western discourse morally. And so, yeah, this is, and I think the key point that you guys have made so well is that this is not just an Israeli war. This is an American war. And if you're an American citizen, this war is being carried out with your resources and in your name.
Yeah, well, so I think we can
we're just hitting about the 60-minute mark. I don't want to keep you too long. So we want to make this, more frequently. So we'll reach out again and hopefully you're available to schedule. And then we'll talk more about, because we do want to delve more into some of the election politics, maybe talk about Vivek. I do find him particularly interesting in some of his viewpoints. And I did see the interview that you did with him. So I do want to discuss that, but tell people where they can find you, Glenn. We do appreciate the time that you gave us today.
It's always fun, man.
And anything else you want to shout out that you might want to let our audience know about?
Yeah, just on the back. I mean, the thing that amazed me was, I said to him, you've been on my show many times opposing U.S. funding of the war in Ukraine on all these grounds. Do you apply this equally to Israel? And he said, absolutely. I oppose the request from Joe Biden to authorize $14 billion to give to Israel. I don't think we should be funding Israel's wars. And I don't think there's been a major party candidate. Obviously, Cornel West would say that, but I don't think there's been a major party candidate who has said anything like that in a long time. Ron Paul has said that. Obviously, Bernie Sanders is not. So, in any event, that was a really interesting interview. I agree.
What do you?
I have this. Go ahead.
What do you make of this new sort of? I guess I don't know if we would label it sort of right populist that has these sort of stances against at least part of the military-industrial complex's sort of policy that they have in certain regions that like a Vivek illustrates. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you can interject that on your way out.
Yeah,
there.
I mean, that's a really interesting question. There's always been this strain in right-wing politics, not necessarily for the best reasons or with the best motives, but opposing U.S. interventionism, which was considered a liberal notion by a lot of people on the right. Remember in 2000, when George Bush ran against Al Gore, his primary critique of the Clinton administration was that they had an insufficiently humble foreign policy. They had criticized Madeleine Albright for wanting to go and fix Yugoslavia and for bombing all these places. And George Bush said, we need a more humble foreign policy. We need to acknowledge we can't use our military to go intervene in and control every other country. Pat Buchanan brought that message when he did extremely well running against the incumbent president, George Bush I. Ron Paul did very well with that message. There's always been this kind of isolationist stream. And with this enhancement of that idea and this kind of skepticism toward the U.S. security state, ushered in by Donald Trump's contempt for the CIA and the military-industrial complex because he perceives them correctly as their political enemies, and they are his political enemies in part because he was running in 2016 opposing the CIA dirty war in Syria. He was saying, why are we trying to remove Assad? Why is that in our national interest to do? It opened up a lot of space in right-wing politics for questioning a lot of the pieties of these kind of globalist, internationalist wars that are being fought in a way that I actually think is healthy and can be exploited and built upon. So I think that's the simple answer to the question.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then anything to add before we put you in the back? Anything else to add before we put you in the back, Glenn?
No, like I said, CJ, we're going to start harassing you to come on our show. We haven't had you on there. We've had Savvy, we've had Nick. So you're next up. And yeah, I'm always happy to talk to you guys wherever.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We still didn't cover the Ukraine thing. Maybe next time because
I saw there's
a
lot going on there.
Yeah, that was. I don't want to take any more of your time because that's something we got to talk about eventually because the giant L, the like Morning Joe and the liberal establishment took on Ukraine. Maybe we say that for next time because I think that's going to be a fun conversation.
I would never let that an hour.
Yeah, I would never
an hour alone.
Anyway, Glenn, thanks for joining.
All right, thank you, Glenn. Nick, we can read some super chats and then because we do want to take a short break for those that don't know, we do have Scott Ritter in an hour. It's a completely separate stream. It's not this stream. Make sure you join us. This is what the graphic looks like when you look for it. Yeah, it's just the simple one with Scott Ritter. Make sure you join us. We're going to take about an hour break. I like this format where we had a nice guest for about 90 minutes or so. And then we take a break and then we have another one. Yeah,
Zoya's like, big shout out to her for helping us get a lot of these great guests we've seen here. So big shout out to Abiding as well for the 99-cent super sticker. Name my talk call. Then we put you up earlier. We appreciate you.
Yes.
Gifting memberships out. This is what I call RBN super back-to-back double header event where we have Glenn Greenwald and we have Scott Ritter. We told you guys we coming back heavy hitting, fam. Like we took holidays off, we had to stretch our limbs off, you know what I mean? We had to let our intellectual muscles rest. Now we back and we coming hard. So we got a great week. We got Mark Kimbley on Thursday as well. We got a lot of great guests coming next week.
We're working on Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore's coming too. We just got to figure out a day. He was not available this week.
Yeah, that should be fun. It's always fun to talk to Jimmy. You got to see Glenn with Glenn and Jimmy. I said this before, and obviously we're not gonna say names because that's rude. But CJ, you have guests where you kind of got to like drag them through a show. Like you got to walk some people through the show. Hey, that's it. All right, that's all right. Let me move on to that. There's some people you got to walk along the process. No, with Glenn and Jimmy, bro, you just say one thing and they on the monologue for like 10 to 15 minutes. So it's always fun to have them on. This is Old Crow. I've seen quite a few of your super chats recently, so I would say they are friends of the show. I appreciate the super chats. Old Crow, I'm just at donation to show some love. Glenn and Scott, this is straight heat. It is straight heat. They're straight heat rocks, they say. If you can please ask Israelis who served in the IDF, live in military communities, or civilians. See, once again, I've been trying to ease up here because on my personal Twitter account, like my personal things, I don't give a fuck. They ban me. It is what it is. But I don't want to hurt the crew. You know what I mean? So there's some things because I like, bro, I swear to God, I could make the argument that, like, bro, if you, anyway, I'll shut up. But if you were part of the IDF, how the fuck are you a civilian, bro? And then a lot of people are harassing, and a lot of people are former IDF agents. They later engage in propaganda against Palestinians. They either get into media or they become straight up militias and harass people in the West Bank and Gaza. So these people
are doing that now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'll be careful. I'm because I feel like I don't have to go that radical to make our argument, but I can make very serious arguments that can bring general consensus. You know what I mean? It's the question I ask that always make people like, damn, Nick, well, I ask you guys just theoretically, like, and I ask this question all the time because it's a hard question to answer. Like, theoretically, if you know there's a pipeline being built that will poison your family, like like you have the Line 3, you have all these pipelines that poison indigenous Americans. There was Line 3 where indigenous protesters was getting their ass beat. They protested pipelines, right? Because they said the pipeline will leak into their water. And they're like, nah, man, come on, man. We built this 30. There's one thing you guys can learn about pipelines. There's one thing that is guaranteed about a pipeline. That shit is going to leak eventually. That's the only thing that you can guarantee about a pipeline. So they said it was going to leak, and guess what happened, CJ, a year later? That motherfucker leaked. And people was poisoned. So the theoretical question in YouTube, I am not advocating anything. This is just a question to provoke people's thought, right? If you know that the pipeline being built in your community will poison your children, don't you have the right to get rid of that pipeline by any means necessary? So, well, technically, once again, Phil, just theoretically speaking, YouTube, if you was to bomb that pipeline, isn't that self-defense? Instead of going through the process of being poisoned, you go through the legal process, you make a compensation 15 years later after your 8-year-old get cancer. Instead of going through this process, you prevent that. That's you protecting your family. Remember what I said yesterday? You as a man have one job, that's to protect your damn family. And me personally, and I will phrase it this way, is there anything morally wrong? We're not talking about legality. Is there anything morally wrong about bombing a pipeline to protect your family? I'm not taking a stance, YouTube. These are the questions I want people to think about.
These are just simple questions. We not advocate violence of any kind, whether to a person or an entity or a pipeline. We love pipelines.
Yeah, I'm a big pipeline fan. And the reason I took that question because I really wish I can get credit. I forgot what I read it. It was an argument against pacifism. Like, how can you argue morally that you're wrong when you preventing your family from being poisoned? You know what I mean? So even if it's legally wrong, like, so you don't have to make it legal. It's not legal. It's legally wrong. You be branded as a terrorist, but morally, is it wrong? Remember, laws do not equal morality. So when you get to intellectual philosophy and this kind of stuff, you question why laws exist. Meanwhile, the average colonized brain, they're like, the law say this, the law say this. No, what we're supposed to do, we're supposed to think there with theory and intellect. This is the working class I want to develop, where you actually think about why we got laws on the book. Why can't we protest at politicians' house? You know what I mean? Don't just accept things at face value. But I shut up. You guys know I get randy at the end of the show. I shut up. But that's a great thought-provoking super chat. We only got a few more here. Thank you for the 1999, John. We need communist versions of Saturday Night Live and South Park so young people can expose PMC boomer imperialism as uncool and socially acceptable. Yeah, that'll be fantastic. As always, comedy is a great way to penetrate propaganda in the masses. Thank you for the $5. Such a great panel. BSNBC. I don't know what that means. BSNBC takes notes. This is what called real journalism. Speaking truth to power 101. Great show, gentlemen. You guys rock, respect. And there's such a damning, it's so damning in the media. You guys know that Glenn Greenwald used to be on MSNBC, like back in the day? What does it say about corporate media that people like Glenn Greenwald is banned? Like, you would never see him on MSNBC and CNN. And then liberals and the Bernie left get mad at Glenn Greenwald for going on Fox News. We're supposed to cancel Glenn Greenwald for going on Tucker Carlson. Don't you know that, CJ? How dare you? Do you know Glenn Greenwald went on Tucker Carlson? Don't you? We're supposed to be upset about that. Meanwhile, CNN and MSNBC won't let them on. I got breaking news for you guys. If I get invite for any one of those channels, I'm going on.
I'm going on, guys. Sorry to let you know. I will be there.
That's your litmus test. You're like, man, you never going on. Bro, if they gave me a spot on MSNBC, you guys would be like, this nigga Nick sold out. Because I would take that out. And I would laugh for a week. Like, you know how Sam Cedar took an hour and he started pushing Russiagate. Nigga, I would take an hour and I was explaining the brutality of Israeli occupation. I was explaining how Joe Biden's complicit with Iraq war. I would have a show for 2 or 3 days. But before I join, people be like, this nigga Nick sold out. He took the MSNBC gig. I'm like, hold up, guys, just wait, guys.
Wait till you see what I have
anyway,
a plan. But before you read that, Nick, because we have a good amount of people here, let me just shout this out. Go to our website. It's scrolling at the bottom. We have merch. You saw Nick wear the red sweater, the red RBN logo sweater yesterday. We got plenty other hoodies. I said sweater, but he had a hoodie. Like this hoodie here. This is our ACAB hoodie. You can see it close up. It says ACAB, and you can see in the letters there's some police there. You can get it in this color. I think that's like a dark navy blue. This is like a red or a burgundy color, maybe maroon. This is yellow. It also comes in white. Many other graphics that you can get. Make sure you check it out. All right, back to the super chats, Nick.
Yeah, what's that?
Let me take that down. Let me take
my
that
new
down.
shirts. Should be here in the next few days. I got email. Shit, take forever. I was like, man, what the fuck are my shirts at? I should be having the next few days. You guys must be spotting it. I'm very happy with how they turned out. Let's put it like, I had to get some more shirts. I had to get more shirts because I was wearing my damn hoodie too much. I'm like, all right, I can't be
people are like, are you homeless? You got a washing machine, Nick? What's wrong? Like, you can bring your clothes over here, sir, if it's not working.
All right, I think I left off here. Thank you for $20. Leonard, has RBN ever discussed Mr. Greenwald's interview with journalist Lee Fain concerning Cop City and Atlanta? Mr. Fain was very dismissive of the community.
I gotta watch this interview. I don't think I've ever even seen or heard of this.
Yeah, Glenn interviews a lot of people on the right. He interviews a lot of people on the right, and of course they're gonna say a lot of stuff we find detestable, right? And when I went on System Update, that's why I can't wait to see your episode when he invites you on one day. It's very interesting because Glenn is, and I take pride in the very few conservatives that follow me as well, because Glenn has a very because he's so prominent. I mean, he got almost 2 million followers, been a very prominent journalist for years. So because of that, he naturally has people on both sides. So he has a large right-wing audience that watches him. So it's very interesting when I go on his show, I'm radical as fuck. And his right-wing audience like, man, this fucking Marxist motherfucker sound basic. That's why I love doing Glenn's show, because Glenn, I know that Glenn has right-wingers that watch him. So I'm like, bro, I'm gonna show him what a fucking true leftist look like. And every single time I went on, I look at like the chat and Rumble, and they get is good reception. So I take pride that our message is appealing to people. There's the loser, dumb left. Then, oh my God, your message is appealing to right wingers. No, that's the point. You want to win as many people to your camp without changing your messaging, of course. Just 3 more super chats when we get out here. We gotta take a break for Scott Ritter. Thank for the 199 Cobra. Terrorism for whom? Thank for super chat. That's
it's all the point of view. All the point of view.
Thank for $5. Do you agree with Jimmy that Sabi went too soft on Jill Stein? To answer your question,
I haven't watched the interview, so I don't know.
I think Sabi did what he always did. I actually talked to Jimmy about this before because I told you a lot of people don't say me and Jimmy were pretty cool. We talked about it before. We had a very constructive conversation about it. I keep it private. We didn't agree on the issue because I believe that, that's just generally how Sabi does her interviews. You ask them questions and you let them expose themselves, right? And now explain that's what Sabi did. That's what you do as a journalist. So me and Jimmy talked about it. We don't agree on everything, but just like men do. Like I said, as men, if we don't agree on something, we talk it out. We'll have a conversation about it. And that's what I did with Jimmy. I thought we had a conversation about it. I think it was very productive and we moved on.
It's stylistic. It's completely stylistic because Jimmy's style is more aligned with my style. That is not at all, for example, your style or Sabi's style. And your style and Sabi's style is not even the same. But I've said this many times. When I describe the five of us, I say you're the you're the nerd. You know the most. You say this all the time that you call yourself a nerd. You know the most. And then I say Rome is the guy in the street. JB is the one who keeps us compassionate. He's always the one who's going to interject. We need to understand and be cognitive of this. And then Sabby is our surgeon. She's going to surgically go in. What does a surgeon do? Does a surgeon go in? I'm about to just start. Does a surgeon go in like that, Nick? No, a surgeon goes in very delicately and precisely. That's not how I would do it. So with that part, I would agree with Jimmy. I would be a lot harder on some, have a lot stronger sort of follow-up questions and in the tone that I'm speaking. But that is not Sabby's style. We can't project our style on somebody else. And
people don't understand that's the goal of our being, to show you guys the shit. We're not a monolith, and to give you different styles of Black radicalism. And we break so many brains because people trying to pin our opinions down on one thing, not realizing that we're a network of different like-minded thinking Black people, free thinking Black people, where we don't I wouldn't say we disagree on things, but we would have like a different take on it. You know what I mean? So I would see people say, I saw Sabby say this, now you're saying this. I saw CJ say this. People don't realize that we're not a monolith. So we break so many people's brains that people don't realize that. Because, like, for example, one prominent example that I will bring up, because it's on top of my tongue, was like the Rage Against the War Machine rally.
Yeah,
because people would see like Sabby take on it, and then people see my take on him. I saw Sabby say this though, and then people say Sabby. I saw Nick say this though. Nigga, we don't have to agree on everything. Like it's
hard for people to understand.
Yeah,
it's hard for people to understand.
Disagree. We just have different takes. We got a different way of processing information.
Or we'll go.
I love it. Yeah.
Or we'll go harder at it. Like, it's the same strategy, but it's like I'm doing this strategy at a level 10. You're doing this strategy. You get what I'm saying? It's all sort of gradations of how we're different. I think that makes us stronger. It makes us less prone to effective attacks. It'll be like, you can't pin us down because we're different people and we have different perspectives. Grew up and have a completely different background. Grew up in different areas.
You know
what makes us? That's what I'm saying. It makes us.
Either in the West Coast, I'm in the Midwest. Sabby and JB on the East Coast, bro. We went fucking Rome from Michigan, bro. We come from different backgrounds, and that's why this is powerful. But big shout out to our last super sticker, Yasim. CJ passing for you for your last call. We will be back. Yeah. We'll be back because we got a double header with Scott. So CJ, I'll give you last words. Anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I'll just shout out the interview. Make sure you come back. Nick and I will be back here in just a little bit for this interview right here that you see on the screen. Now, we're going to start at 3 p.m. Eastern, but Scott will be joining maybe 15 or 20 minutes after we start. So make sure you're here for that. I want to see everybody that watched us here. Make sure you come back for that. It's going to be a great interview. And that's it. See you guys.